all sat at our cubicles, didn't talk to each other because you got in trouble for talking, because they were more about productivity and wanted to make sure that you got everything knocked out. So basically you just came to work, did your job, and went back home. And at that point, I was just going into work and going home just so I could make a paycheck. And I wasn't like passionate about what I was doing, and basically I think being passionate, like you want to continue your education, and at that point I was just like maintaining my education. We have continuing education CEUs, so we had to keep on top of that, but other than that I just didn't extend my knowledge because I wasn't passionate about it. I had no problem learning HTML and CSS when I started learning it. I think it was the JavaScript where it was my hardest. And I had a problem retaining what I was learning and comprehending what I was learning. And I think like looking back at it now is I wasn't practicing what I was learning. And when you're there in the moment, you don't think about it, you think of other things. You think of like, oh, it's just because I'm stupid and I don't know what I'm doing. And that's kind of where I have no idea what I'm doing because that's how I felt. But then you don't think about it. You don't think of it as like, oh, I just need to practice more. You think of it as I'm stupid. And so at that point, I just quit and I gave up on those courses. And that was probably 4 years ago. In those 4 years, I did that 3 times where I started learning and stopped, because each year I was like fed up with work, and I was like, I need to do something about it. And that's what I just kept telling myself. And then I would give up because I would get to JavaScript and then I would like not be able to do anything with it. And so like I said, I did that off and on for 3 years. And then that brings us to a year ago. So, as I said, my husband's a front-end web developer, and he was actually offered a position here in Texas. We're originally from Indiana, and my husband got a job offer from Toyota Connected, and so we moved to Texas last year. With us moving, I had to talk to my company and tell them that I was leaving, and at that time, they didn't want you to work remote because they wanted productivity. And they were afraid that if you worked from home, you wouldn't be productive. So they actually offered me and allowed me to work from home remote. So when we moved to Texas, I started to work remote. And the first month that I worked remote, it was horrible. I was so depressed because that was my first time working remote, and I was working for a job that I wasn't passionate about, and I was lonely. And at that time, my husband was in all of these big meetings and staying at work until like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And I was, by myself. And so I was super depressed. I would call him on his lunch crying because I was like, I hate this. So I knew at that point I was at my lowest that I needed to do something about it. And so I was like, all right, I already know what I want to do. I just need to do something about it and tell myself that I can actually do it and make myself do it. And so that's when I decided to look at more resources. And not the same ones, because each time I kept going back and forth, I kept looking at the same ones. I kept looking at Code Academy and Free Code Camp. And so at this time I was like, I'm gonna go and research other options. So I actually looked at this resource, Treehouse. Team Treehouse is actually the resource that I picked, but when I was doing my research, each one said that Treehouse was the best option for those who are beginners or who are noobs, and that they offer courses, video courses, so like visual representation and like learning instead of all text-based. And that's what made me want to look at it more, because I knew that I was a visual learner and that it would be best for me. But the one thing that stopped me from going to Treehouse the first 3 times that I looked at resources was because of you had to pay for it. And everyone told me that I needed to, that I could learn for free. And so I just listened to them because I was like, well, if they know that, I can learn for free. And so I just should learn from these other resources. But this time around, I looked at Treehouse, and decided that I was going to go with Treehouse. Now, Treehouse offers a basic plan, and then they offer a tech degree plan, which, oh, I guess I should say what Treehouse is. So Treehouse is an online learning technology school that offers beginner to advanced courses in web design, web development, mobile development, and game development, taught by a team of expert teachers. Its courses are aimed at beginners looking to learn coding skills for a career in the tech industry. And so they offer the front-end tech degree. They actually offer 4 tech degrees: front-end, full stack, iOS, and Python. And so when I was looking at this, I was looking at the front end because I knew that I wanted to do front end. And what they offered with this tech degree is they offered that you will learn these skills: HTML, CSS, Sass, JavaScript, jQuery, and React. What you're getting, so you're getting those video courses like I mentioned, which is definitely what I wanted because I wanted a visual, like to visually see what was happening. And you could also pull up like a playground while watching the video, and so you could code side by side. And then you also, so you would watch a course, then you would take a quiz on what you just watched, and then you would take a coding challenge. So basically, they're teaching you it, and then you're practicing, or you're testing yourself about it, and then you're practicing it. And where that practice was what I wasn't getting before. And so I knew that this is definitely what I wanted, because I'd be able to retain what I was learning. So they also offered 12 projects, and the last project would be your portfolio. The only thing that they required is you can't submit a project more than, or like it was a minimum of 1 week, so you couldn't submit a project like once every day. So the minimum amount to finish this tech degree would be 12 weeks. And then they also gave you the Slack community, which I'll talk a little bit more about that here later, and then the certification. So it says I enrolled in September of 2017. Now here's where the crazy thing goes. My husband actually told me no, not to sign up for it. And that's not him not being supportive. There's kind of like a backside to that. When I was enrolled in college, I would do the starting and stopping, like I told you before. Because when things got hard, I just quit. Because I was like, I'm too stupid, I'm not going to be able to do it. And so when I was doing college, I would spend thousands of dollars, and a couple weeks in, I would give up. And so that's wasted money because you can't get a refund. And so finally, my husband's like, we can't keep doing this because you want to start and stop it, and we're going to lose money if you want to do that each year. And so I said, if I try to enroll for something, tell me no, and I just won't do it. So when I finally brought this up to him, he was like, Haley, I'm telling you no because you told me before to tell you no. And I said, but this is something that I know I need to do or I'm going to be stuck. And he said no, and I was like, I'm just doing it anyway. So I signed up for that. So I told him that I was like, he said no, he went to sleep, woke up the next morning, went to work, and I signed up. Because I was like, I am going to push myself. If I give up, I am going to regret it in a year like I've done throughout college. Because if I give up in the next year, I'm like, why did I do that? I would have already been done with my 4-year college. And each year I would just regret it and hate myself for doing it. And so I said, I'm going to sign up for this. No, it's not thousands of dollars. It's a month, $199 a month. And so it's not thousands of dollars, but it is lost money, you know? But I'm held accountable for that. And so I told him, I was like, I signed up for it, can't go back now. And he's like, well, can't do anything about it now. So he's like, you better do it. And so that's when I finally enrolled in September of 2017. So while I was going through the actual tech degree, first 3 projects were totally easy and knocked those out. Those were basically HTML and CSS, which I've already done, the past couple of years. So I had no problem doing those. But while I was waiting for projects to be graded, I worked kind of after hours, working on the Slack community. They offer that Slack community for each tech degree. So in the front end one, it was all front end students that were in that tech degree. And our channels were channels for each project or each unit. So basically what I would do is I would go through Slack, and if someone had a question, I would answer it, and it made me test the skills that I know. And also reviewed other student developers' code. If they needed a review before a project, I could review their code, offer any suggestions of why their code might be broken, or offer like any areas where they could refactor their code. But basically, like if someone had a question and they asked it and I'd never even done that unit yet, I would still go and search for that answer, and it would like make me ready. And like even if I found the answer, I would tell them. But if I didn't know the answer, at least I tried looking for it, and at least maybe I know for next time, like when I actually get to that unit and I'm ready to like answer some of those questions. So I did that after hours, and I love my husband. I love him a lot, and he's very supportive. But he was like, "Why are you doing that? Like, you need." Like, I would spend no time. I would get up, and I was doing this while working full time, mind you. So I was working for the healthcare remote, and then after work, I was doing learning, and then after I was learning, I was helping out. And so I would go to bed at like midnight. And so I would hang out with my husband. He was like, "Why are you doing this?" And I was like, "Wait, you'll see. You'll see." But we'll go into that a little bit more. But there were some struggles, let me tell you. So as I've been saying throughout this whole thing, I've started and stopped a lot of stuff. And so Project 4 was the worst project ever. It was when we were learning SAS. And I actually almost gave up. And that's where I was like, I'm gonna hate myself for giving up. But I learned all of the content, all of what I needed to know, and then I got ready for the project. And I just sat there at my computer. Didn't write any code. I just sat there and looked at my text editor, and I was like, I don't know where to start. And I was like, how can I like not know where to begin? $600 to finish the tech degree. So that's crazy to believe. And so, like I said, I'm on week 2, and I've learned so much stuff. I think like I walk in and people ask me like, "Do you know this? Do you know this?" And I'm like, "No, I have no idea." But I've learned so much, and it's crazy to believe that. Just last year I was so miserable, and now I'm like so excited to come to work, so excited to learn new things, and I'm actually like passionate. My husband has to tell me, stop talking about work. He's like, stop talking about work. Which brings me also to the thing is like, I bring it back in front of him, and I'm like, you told me not to do the tech degree. You told me not to work extra hard on this. And he's like, I know, like he regrets doing it. But if he wouldn't have told me no, like that wouldn't have pushed me harder. Like him telling me no made me like want to like throw it in his face and like show him that I was right. That's what I asked him. I was like, what should I prepare for? And he was like, if you don't know it, you don't know it. And he was like, you could practice everything, and they can ask you something totally different. But what I did, so I actually had 3 interviews. I had one with the HR, and I had one with our team lead, and then the director, and then I had one in person. And so HR, pretty simple. I just went over like, basic questions like, why do you want to work here? What's your weaknesses and stuff like that. Then for the one over the phone, it was basically like the same thing, but it was more focused on like Treehouse and how I help students. And like if I had a problem and I didn't know the answer, like how I would give them the answer or something like that. And then finally was the one in person, and so the one over the phone didn't really study for it because it's like, you can't do any code over the phone. You can just like explain something. And so I didn't really study for that one, but for the actual in-person one, I spent a week practicing for it, and I went over everything. Like I went probably to like 100 websites and looked at everything. Like, you know, types and like what's the difference between, you know, the strict equal and stuff like that, and object oriented, and I looked up everything. And I remember the day before, I was like, my brain was like mush, and I was like, okay, I need to stop, because at that point you're not retaining what you're studying, and you're just going to go in there and be like, I totally forget. And so I came in, and I didn't know it was going to be a panel. I thought it was just going to be me and the director and like maybe the team lead, because he was on the phone. And so they're like, okay, the team's coming. I was like, what? And so there were, 5 or 6 people in there, and that was my first interview. So I had no other interviews. So this was my first interview, and I would say I nailed it. Maybe like, meh. But the thing is they kind of like sat me down and talked to you beforehand, so it wasn't like just jump right in and code this. They asked me like questions like about myself and about Treehouse and what I did, and if I had this type of question, how did I answer it, and stuff like that. So we kind of talked, and they asked me personal questions like what do I do in my free time, and like stuff like that. Then we actually go in there, and everyone sits down on one side, and then I'm over here, and we just start talking. They start asking questions, like Travis looked at some of my code and asked me a question, well, why did you do this when you coded it? Like, did they tell you? Because he was looking at my projects. Because I had a few personal projects, but mostly were my Treehouse projects from the tech degree. And so he asked, why did you do that? Did they tell you how to do it, or did you just do it? And so I explained that. But I really had one like whiteboarding question to reverse a string, and I just walked through it. I went to the last woman who coded the whiteboarding, and so I already knew some of what whiteboarding, like what you should do, like how you should talk, how you should explain it, and stuff like that. So basically, I just talked through it and didn't give them the opportunity to like say anything. I guess they didn't need to, but I just walked through it. They did ask me why I went the way I went and why I didn't go the simple way. And I just said, well, I thought you would want to see the harder way. But they did ask me how I would simplify it, so I told them. But then after that, they were like, okay, you can sit down. And then we just started talking. And if they had like the question, I was like, well, can I write it on the whiteboard? And they're like, yeah, go ahead. But that was only whiteboarding. But I did do some like SAS whiteboarding and stuff like that. But yeah, the one thing, so my husband did say, I was like, well, what should I study? And he was like, well, you can't really study. He was like, but go back and look at some SAS stuff. And I was like, they're not going to ask me about SAS. The whole thing was SAS. And I was like, but I did good. But the one thing he did tell me to look up, I didn't. And, you know, but like he said, is you can't really know what's going to be on there. And I did like study way too hard. But it's never a bad